Welcome back to another episode of Spilling the Connectivi-Tea, the podcast that serves you the tea you won't find anywhere else in wholesale. I'm your host, Ben Shoesmith. In each episode, we get the kettle on with an industry expert, spilling the tea on what's working, what's changing, and the insights worth brewing over. So grab your tipple of choice, it is time to get into the Connectivi-Tea. In this episode, we sit down with Karen Mckenzie, who is Director of Service and Revenue Operations in our fixed wholesale division. We're going to hear what it's really like as a woman in telco. We're going to be covering her career path, the culture she's navigated, and her take on whether the industry is making genuine progress on gender diversity or just going through the motions. So with that being said, welcome to the podcast, Karen.
Thank you, Ben.
How are you doing today?
A little bit nervous, I'm not going to lie. First podcast, so go easy with me.
Don't be nervous, not at all. Well, we've got some questions to start, just so people get to know you a little bit better. A staple question of the podcast, first and foremost, it's a very important one. Are you a tea or coffee person?
Tea every day of the week.
Yeah?
Every day of the week. I mean, I'm from Yorkshire as well, so it goes hand in hand.
The best tea.
Oh,
Yorkshire tea, in my opinion, is the best.
absolutely.
If we had to get a little bit stronger with that question, would you say an espresso martini or a Long Island iced tea?
So I'm going to say espresso martini, but my friend that recently went on holiday with me would disagree. She said I literally never shut up after I had the coffee intake, so definitely my favourite.
So maybe your friends would steer you away from an espresso martini.
Absolutely.
See, for me, I would do a Long Island iced tea. I find it stronger, so that's it's got to mix everything in it. So for me, that's a no-brainer. But also, I'm not a fan of iced coffee, really.
Yeah.
So I haven't ever veered towards an espresso martini. Maybe one day when my
Well, if your energy's lacking, my experience is pick me up.
Maybe that's what I need. Lastly, for this little part, are you more about freshly boiled ideas, or do you like to let things brew before you act? So in other words, how spontaneous and agile are you? And this could be in a work sense, it could be in a personal sense.
I am very spontaneous and agile. I think we've recently done things like insights at work, and I am off the scale with my yellow. So, I'm literally off to the next new shiny thing as soon as I've finished with this one. So spontaneity is definitely my thing.
Love that. I'm one of the same. So obviously today we're talking everything about gender diversity in the industry, and we're bringing it to life through your perspective. So for listeners, it'll be great just to understand a little bit more about yourself. So it'd be great to hear about your career path. I mean, I know you've worked across various sectors, most of which are male dominated. So how have you found this experience, and how have you navigated through this changing world that we're working in?
Yeah, no problem. I probably could talk for 15 minutes on my CV, so I'll kind of give you a snapshot. I think probably one of the most key parts is I actually left school with no GCSEs, and it wasn't because I didn't have the capability. I was the typical, if Karen spent more time focusing than she did talking, she'd be an A student. But actually, when I left school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My maths teacher got me a job as an office junior in the summer holidays, and I went to work in this aerospace office. And about 3 or 4 weeks in, the manager said, "Could you do me a favour? These people owe us money. Could you go and chase it?" And I'm like, "What about chasing debts?
Yeah.
This feels a bit uncomfortable." Anyway, that was kind of the start of my career, and loved it. Ended up becoming a credit controller, which I didn't even know was a career.
Yeah.
And then very quickly moved from there into a company that was called Granada Accounting Services, which then became Compass Group, and kind of worked my way quite quickly through the ranks, becoming a credit controller into team manager, ops manager, and actually ended up as the head of UK debt management for Compass Group at, I think, around 23. And I remember looking back going, "Oh my God, these people are so much more mature and older and experienced than me." But one thing I realised very early on is that I really love people. I love leading, I love developing and coaching, and it's been a really key thread through my career.
Yeah.
And then the other part was I love change. So I was constantly challenging the status quo. From there, I then moved to British Gas. It was, again, in a credit control environment where very different culture than working in the other industry. and it was definitely a culture that I probably didn't thrive in.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave me an opportunity to move from just doing credit and collections into customer services, which you'll hear are the two key themes of my experience and background. So after having my first child, I decided that wasn't the right culture for me, and I wanted to find a business that I could thrive in.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up coming to VMO2. And I actually took a step down. So I'd gone from being a head of department and into an operations manager role,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that culture was really important for me.
Mm-hmm.
And actually at the time, probably didn't think about a male-dominated environment, but it became very apparent.
Yeah.
So I joined, and I think that's where my career really took off. When I
Mm-hmm.
joined VMO2, I had multiple roles across that time frame. I think I've done everything from sales, order entry, service, revenue ops, which I'll come back to because I think that's a really important part of my experience. And then very, very lucky, a leader that I used to work for in business put me on a program called Fast Forward,
Mm-hmm.
which was a Liberty Global program. And on returning from that, I was offered a position in network expansion, which was the build program previously known as Project Lightning. And I went in there as the planning director,
Mm-hmm.
and then had multiple roles during my time. And then I finished my last role with VMO2 as the build director for the South, building out the network. I then decided it was maybe time. I'd been here, I think, 14 years at that point, to see what the world was like outside of VMO2. And at that time, I was headhunted by Hyperoptic. So I went to Hyperoptic for a year. And then I was actually coming back to VMO2. I'd had a conversation with a previous leader, and something changed, and I ended up working for a build partner of VMO2, something I said I would never, ever, ever do. But actually, it was a phenomenal experience in my career, and I'll probably refer back to it.
Yeah.
And then the opportunity came to come back home,
Yeah.
and I always knew I would. And I grabbed it with both hands. So came back over to VMO2, again, doing the role I'd left as the people director for the South. And then best opportunity probably I've had in a very, very long while was to join the fixed wholesale team last February as the service and revenue operations director, which is probably where I get my energy and my passion. So I obviously applied for the role, grabbed it with both hands, and here I am.
Here we are.
So that was a very whistle-stop tour. So yeah.
And do you think over time, like, have you seen a difference in that male-dominated space and navigating through that?
Definitely. I think if I broke my career up into 3 decades, so decade 1, I was quite young and quite successful, very young in terms of reaching a HOD at 23. And I don't think people took me seriously. I think they saw me as a very young girl, very inexperienced, and probably underestimated my capability a little bit. I think the second decade, and this existed in the first decade, but I was less aware of it, very, very male-dominated industry. Behaviours were very dominant, and I found myself mirroring the behaviours of my male colleagues. So I became quite dominant. I overspoke. I focused very much on my career rather than what was right for the business. And embarrassingly, when I look back, I'm quite embarrassed by my behaviour, totally out of my comfort zone. I felt if I had a sickly child or I needed time off, that would impact my progression, my career. So probably a really uncomfortable time in my career where I look back and go, I wish I'd been braver during that decade. And then I look to the decade we're in now, and the world is worlds apart. And not just within VMO2, but VMO2 has done this really, really well, where, you know, diversity is a real focus, how we work with women in our industry. So 3 very different periods, and I actually wish I'd been stronger in maybe some of those previous decades.
Well, it's interesting, like, to hear you reflecting on that. I think it's only now you can probably look back with that and cast your opinion over all of those decades. And I think where you said about mirroring behaviour, I think that's only natural, isn't it? Because if you're surrounded by people like that, that's just what you take to, isn't it?
It is. It's funny, I used to have a boss while I was at VMO2, very early days, and I almost refer to him as a bit of a chameleon, because whoever he worked for, he would mirror their behaviours. And I always worried that, did he have his own values, or
is he just copying everybody else?
But again, it was a real reflection for me to go, actually I want to understand what my core values are, and I
Yeah.
want to bring them every day.
Yeah, well, and I think all of that has probably shaped your approach today, more of which we'll come on to later.
Yeah.
It feels like diversity in our industry has been a talking point for a very long time at this point. Do you think about your gender much at work, or is it something which is brought to your attention in certain situations?
So I think, kind of building on what we just spoke about, I
Mm.
probably did previously. And I think, had you have asked me that question 6, 7 years ago, definitely. The world's definitely changed. And, I think I very rarely think about being a woman in my role. I have a great boss and a great set of peers in fixed wholesale who are very open to recognising the diversity that we all bring. So
Yeah.
feel very, very comfortable in the environment I work in today.
Yeah.
I think where it probably does resonate for me is actually when so I'm a part-time single mother, and actually when I have challenges in the home life, it then impacts my work life.
Yeah.
So it's more about how I think about it rather than it being an issue in work, and then starting to think about how it impacts people when I need to take time off.
Yeah.
And then probably the other area is subconsciously, I think I definitely suffer from imposter syndrome, like a lot of people. But I don't always connect that with being a woman. But I think there is part of that.
I think that's
that drives
part of it for sure, isn't there? And I mean, I am sat here as a guy, but I imagine there's pressures that women face, which we don't. And like you said about being a mother, I believe you said one of the challenges you had was trying to balance being a woman, a mother, and a leader at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think you feel guilty. I think you feel guilty because you want to be the best you can be for everyone, whether it's your team, your peers, and your children.
Yeah.
But it is very tricky. But it has become easier. Most definitely.
Did you have any examples of like specific times when you faced like misogyny?
Yeah, so it actually wasn't at VMO2, so I'll be really clear. So one of my roles, so I have 2 children, one has epilepsy and ADHD and one recently with autism. And I went through a very specific period in my career where I was getting constant phone calls, needed to go home. And I actually worked for a female leader, which is interesting. So because it isn't just males when we talk about female versus males. I think there are still pockets of the industry that behave the way we used to. And they made me, they weren't supportive. I really struggled. I felt like a failure. And I remember leaving the organisation and looking back going, I don't know what's happened to me. I have completely failed in a role. And actually on reflection, when I left, I failed because I didn't have the support in place. So yeah, a real key time for me in my career where had I have had that support, and I've got a positive example at VMO2 where the opposite happened and I still thrived whilst going through a difficult time.
100%. I think part of that argument as well is around pipeline. So I think maybe we're just not attracting enough of the right people, or certainly a diverse group of people to work in our industry. In your experience, how true do you believe this to be? And do you think that's the whole story?
So I think pipeline is definitely an issue. I think predominantly women look at a job description and go, if I can't do 100% of the job, I'm not going to apply for it. And no disrespect to my male colleagues, I think that's just how we're made. They would look at a job description with 60% of the skills that was required, and they would absolutely go for that job. So I think that's the first issue we have in male-dominated roles, and we are changing that. The way we attract now is much better. But I actually think the bigger 2 areas for me is around retention and progression. So I think you see probably mid of a woman's career where they go off to have children, they go off to care for an elderly parent, they come back and, their confidence has been impacted. They've had a period outside of the business, and we need to do more in that space to support people returning to work. And then I think in terms of the progression element of it, what happens then is because you've been out of the business, you haven't got the same experience as maybe your male colleague that hasn't had that time out. So it also then prevents that progression.
For sure. And I think, like you said, I think at VMO2 we are very well supported in terms of everything like that. But specifically in wholesale as well, I think we have a really good mix of people. I don't know what the stats are, but I'm sure that we are probably above average in wholesale because we have a a lot of females, we have a lot of people from different backgrounds. So I think I'm proud to work in a department and a business like that. And especially in my team, like I'm one of 6 and there's 4 women in my team. So that is definitely way above the industry norm. So
I could completely agree. I think fixed wholesale is really great on gender diversity, but it's not just about the statistic either. It's about how we behave, the culture that we bring in fixed wholesale that really opens up people to come to work and be their authentic self.
Absolutely. It's not just a tick box exercise, is it? It's about following through in what you're promising and delivering on that. In terms of talent then, and we spoke about attracting talent, what kind of what do you think the industry is missing? So
I think in terms of talent, and it's probably the obvious answer, AI is absolutely consuming the world at the minute. So and I know we were chatting off camera earlier about ChatGPT and things like that. But I think, AI is absolutely the future. I think we have a small skill set within our organisation at the minute. And I also think that's where the upcoming gender and the young people of our generation are absolutely versed in it. And we need to think about how we tap into that. So I think definitely AI and kind of software development, APIs, etc. But I think there's also that piece around diversity in views. So I think, we need different views, different opinions to really make that organisation thrive.
Well, and especially in the world of like service, which is everything that you guys cover, isn't it? So that's hugely important.
Absolutely. I mean, customer first. I know we talk about it as an organisation and partner trust, but it's absolutely the kind of foundations of building the business.
Yeah, for sure. As a female director in our business and a senior leader in the industry, do you feel there's responsibility that comes with that? And do you also think there's something we could be talking more about, or different topics we could be talking more about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, does a responsibility come with it? Absolutely. And I think not just within our industry, outside of our industry, and as a parent, as a mother to a daughter and her friends, I like to think that I will play that role model and make sure that we're creating the right culture. I think in terms of reflecting on things we could talk more about, I know if I could go back and talk to myself 10, 15 years ago, I would probably talk more openly about the challenges I had after giving birth, postnatal depression, moving into menopause most recently. I know I don't look old enough. However, I would definitely wish I'd been more open about some of the challenges I had, because I think the more senior leaders talk about those challenges, the more people will feel comfortable to talk to their line managers, open up about the challenges. Again, I do think we have moved miles apart from where we were in terms of, we have so much support around mental well-being at work, acceptance around menopause. We also have a huge amount of ally up networks. So we've got Women in Tech and other networks that really support people. So I think I wish I'd done it sooner, but I think we're definitely moving on within the industry. For sure.
And obviously you mentioned earlier being a single parent for the majority of your career, I believe. You feel as if doors are opening in the last few years. Do you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think being quite transparent, the gender focus has always started to open up doors for females. To be clear with that doesn't mean a female gets a job over a male colleague. It just means that there is diversity at that interview stage that allows somebody to see the capabilities and calibre. But I think if I look back and jobs that I wouldn't have took on because of my personal circumstances, we now have flexible working, which is more the norm than the exception. I think we are very balanced in terms of well-being, charity days, things that allow people to spend time at home and with their families in different ways. So I think, again, I will say the industry's moved on tremendously, and I certainly feel more comfortable now. And for certainly new people joining our organisation, I think they will experience something very, very positive.
I can second that. Obviously, I'm 23, I've been in the business 5 years. I feel like I've probably navigated a different world to the one you started in. But I would definitely second everything you just said. And in terms of, you just spoke about what people should be talking about more. In terms of advice, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given? And by a way of passing that on, what advice would you give to those at the start of their career in tech or in telco, especially women looking to move into this industry?
I think there's probably a couple, if I may. I think the first one is kind of what I slightly touched on at the beginning, which is don't wait. So you will never, ever be ready for that next role. You won't. Part of applying for that next role is to develop. And I think the times where I've been most successful and learnt the most is when I've been out of my comfort zone. And I actually remember listening to Diego's podcast, and he referred to something similar, but I genuinely believe if you're uncomfortable, you're learning. So push yourself forward, don't wait. I think that's really important. And don't underestimate sideways moves. I still think people think promotion is upwards. I would never have been ready for my HOD role, my director role, had I not had multiple sideways moves to kind of build that breadth and skill set. So embrace that. Don't think it's just upwards.
100%.
My second one would probably be your network. Don't underestimate your network. And your network won't give you a new job, but it will open up doors because of the relationships that you've built. So invest in those relationships and spend time building out your network. And I think for me, probably the biggest one is authenticity. So, psychological safety in an organisation is really, really important, and culture. And I may come back to it. But I think just you don't have to wear a different mask at home as you do in the office. And what you bring is diversity. Being in an organisation where you can be yourself, it's absolutely where businesses will benefit and flourish from having those diverse opinions.
I suppose that ties into the idea of the pressures women face and responsibilities at home or childcare. All goes into that, right? And it's being honest about those struggles at times and keeping that conversation going. I totally agree. Obviously, I'm aware I am sat here as a male host of this podcast talking about gender diversity in an industry which is known for not being very diverse. Is there anything practically men can be doing to support and advocate for their female colleagues?
Definitely, I think. I think first of all, become role models. I think if I look back at what I've experienced through my career, those decades have changed with the age of the males that have come through the industry. So somebody like yourself should be setting a role model for future generations of men that are going to come through the organisation. So I think that's really important. And part of that is speaking up when you see things that aren't right or you observe behaviour that doesn't feel comfortable. I think it's too easy to kind of observe and not like it, but not speak up. I think I talked earlier about some of the networks that we have. The networks, despite having women in the name, are not for women. They're as much for male colleagues as they are for women. And then probably finally, that sponsorship of women. I think sponsor, mentor women and learn. I think mentor and mentoree relationships are both giving and taking. It's not just about what you get as a mentoree. As a mentor, you can learn from your mentee as well.
100%. I feel like maybe a lot of men probably struggle to have that conversation around this topic and speaking directly to women about it. So I suppose it's also like being curious and understanding what commitments women in your team might have, or just broadening your horizons. I think that's important too.
I think the be curious. I think that's absolutely, be curious, go and find out, go and have conversations. And you're right, they're not comfortable, but if we don't start having those difficult conversations, we won't take 100%. The next step.
And times are changing, we need to move forward. And like I said, I'm one of 6 in my team and 4 of those are women. I absolutely love working with my team, and I enjoy female company too, so it's a bit of a no-brainer. There's nothing to shy away from. We shouldn't avoid this conversation at all going forward. And I'd like to think, certainly as a younger person as well, that times are changing, and I'd like to think that as I progress through my career, things are only going to get better. Not in terms of just gender diversity, but obviously race and sexuality too. There's so much conversation to be had there. And I just would like to think that we can only keep moving forward. There's never enough to be said about that. So.
I think we need to normalise it, don't we? I think it shouldn't be an agenda item. It should
100%.
Be embedded into the culture that we do it, not something with a statistic that we're trying to drive towards. Once it becomes part of your DNA and you're not talking about a statistic, that's where you've really shifted the kind
100%.
of bar.
I totally agree. Sadly, we are coming to the end of today's conversation, but that does mean it's time for our Spill It Quick segments. This is a section we do on each episode. They're just some quick fire questions. I'm looking for the first answer that comes to mind. Nothing overly complex or well thought out, just what comes to mind first. So are you ready?
I am.
Yeah. The first question is, what is the industry myth you'd like to stir up or set straight?
Ooh. I think let's go with set straight. So I think there is still a belief out there that gender diversity and diversity and equality in general doesn't necessarily translate to the bottom line of an organisation. Definitely set straight. I think, there is proven research now that companies that have a great diverse gender and equality are absolutely, I think it's statistically quite a high percentage of increasing profitability just by generating diverse ways of thinking and innovation.
For sure, and I think it just brings together different perspectives, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Better decision making, more creativity, 100%. The next one is, what is the next big brew in connectivity? So what do you think is the next trend that we should all be looking out for?
So I know I've said this already, but I think it's the reality. It's AI. So, every single day now we're seeing it. And I think the industry has gone quicker and quicker over each decade with how it's transforming. So definitely AI.
I think it's like using AI in the right way, isn't it? And it's a tool that is going to become more and more apparent, and it's embedded into everyday life now. So completely agree.
And I think somebody said at one of our conferences that, AI is not about replacing jobs, and it's going to happen. So we've got to embrace it. It's about really taking away those mundane tasks that people do and adding value back into people's jobs.
For sure. And then the last one is, every career has its ups and its downs. You could say has its bitter brews. What is one challenge you've faced that has shaped your approach today?
So probably lots. If I go back to probably my very early years, which was a long time ago. So my mum was a single parent that brought me up. Didn't see a lot of my dad as a young girl, and had a younger brother and sister. And while she did an amazing job, things were tight at times. And it really gave me the drive that I wanted to be successful for my mum and demonstrate that she brought me up really well, and despite my GCSEs that I could really make a difference. And it's really driven me to want to do the best I can, be the best leader that I can, and help people that I want to take them on that journey and make sure that they also have a really successful career. And it's continued to give me the drive to do the same for my own family. So it's been a kind of thread through my career.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice note to leave the episode on, hearing how such an early experience or that early time in your life has carried through with you today. And you're now doing the same, hopefully, for your children and being that role model as well. So sadly, that is a wrap on today's episode. A huge thank you, Karen, for joining us and opening up. It's been great to hear about from your perspective, the gender diversity, and hear about your career too and your highs and lows. If you have enjoyed this conversation, make sure you hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We'll be back soon, serving up more stories, more insights, and plenty more behind the scenes connectivity that you won't find anywhere else.